New rumors that two Big 12 schools are actively talking to the SEC about joining their conference. That's not good. Or is it real? This is a Locked On Big 12 Locked On Utes crossover.
You are Locked On Big 12, your daily podcast on the Big 12 Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Monday, everybody. Welcome to a Locked On Big 12 Locked On Utes crossover. I'm Drake Toll from America's #1 Big 12 podcast, Locked On Big 12. It's JT Westerself, Locked On Utes. Thanks for making our shows your first listen every single day. Big 12 members looking for an SEC jump. Kansas and Colorado on the front end of this, and it might not be as crazy as this new report sounds. We'll get there to start, but also Nick Sabin trying to ruin college football, condense the entire thing to 40 schools. That would be how you say bad. And then new from the media, Utah, good guys, BYU, bad guys. Who better to talk about it? JT Westerself. Is the tide turning with all this tampering stuff? Maybe. If you hit subscribe, we get to keep our jobs. JT, this came out this week from one of those anonymous reporters via a fan forum who has written books, pages, notes on how Kansas, Colorado, and Nebraska are all on their way to the SEC, giving a whole lot of information on why this is going to happen, and compares this. Here's where I do kind of start to think, not the wildest thing in the world. Compares this to Missouri's move, which Kansas is basically Missouri. Colorado is basically Missouri. The fact that the SEC added the Tigers doesn't make a ton of sense, but now there are these underground reports that the SEC, and we already knew like a year ago they may want Kansas for basketball. New reports that Colorado and Kansas are enticing and the league might want them.
I could see it. I'm just going to say right away, Drake. With message boards, I don't buy it. We haven't seen it enough from they don't have the track record of the reporting. So I can't get behind it from that case. But I will say, just like, hey, if we're just a conversation, what do we think of these schools? I could see it, but also I still just feel like there are bigger fish that the SEC would want. And I think that's good for you, for the Big 12, for the members like a Utah, because you want to keep Kansas and Colorado if you can. Those are big brands. Those are two of the biggest brands in the conference right now. Deion, at least he locked in that new contract, so maybe he's here to stay for a little bit, which automatically makes Colorado one of the biggest stories in the sport. You already mentioned Kansas basketball, not the football, what it is, but still to have a team every year in the conversation for being the best in the country, that's a big thing. And I do think that football program is going to get back into the right spot. I know they had a little bit of a down year last year too, but I think these teams are going to stay. But I do think if I was the SEC, depending on how big I was expanding, they would have appeal to me. And you mentioned the fact they added Missouri in the past. I will say that I think the past being key there, just because and we're going to talk about the Nick Saban thing, right, where he talks about being a top 40 school and some of those things. I don't know if Kansas and Colorado are. Like if we're talking about not just like realignment teams, but let's like take the top 40 schools in the country. That's a conversation about Kansas and Colorado, especially because so much of Colorado's value, as we said, is built on Deion. So it does make it interesting. If they expanded it enough, I could see it. But as of right now, I don't see it happening.
Yeah, I think a big piece that's explained in this message board post from a guy who claims to have sources connected to multiple schools, and everybody loves to claim that their sources tell them all kinds of things. So is this legitimate? I hope not. but it makes for a talking point where, as he mentions, the Missouri comp was what really drove me toward this storyline. You hear all the time, like, Gonzaga to the Big 12, and you find out just kind of smoke and mirrors. And a lot of times you'll hear, hey, will the Big 10 kick out Nebraska because their AAU status expired or was taken away? And that's a lot of smoke and mirrors. This made sense because of the Missouri comp. I just don't know if the SEC would take another Missouri. I don't know if they would make a move like that. Now, where this would be good for Kansas, Colorado, and Nebraska is they get some Big 8 schools back together, brand growth. They've now got historic rivalries that are back. They boost their own exposure. Their media rights deal is great for the SEC. There is regional consolidation. They can continue to kill college football, which seems to be the trajectory they're looking for. And along with that, they have the College World Series presence in Omaha. That is mentioned in this rumor. And could they bring in, to balance this out, a Florida State? If we're talking about the SEC, we often do, about how the SEC wants to create a chokehold via ESPN or whatever, a chokehold on college football. If they're going to do that altogether, they're going to have to take the last 2, 3, 4 pillars of the Big 12 or the ACC. That's where this could come into play when the SEC says, hey, look, We want your biggest basketball brand. We want your Deion Sanders. That would be bad for the Big 12 and would expedite the process of the SEC being the only dog in college football.
That's interesting what you just mentioned, the SEC being the only dog, because what we didn't talk about as much, and you mentioned it a little bit there, is if they were to bring in Nebraska. Now, if you're the Big Ten, would you view Nebraska as a major loss? Maybe not, but I'd be interested to see that, because we've heard reports are Tony Petitti, Big Ten commissioner, Greg Sankey, SEC commissioner. They're on good terms. They talk about all these things, and right now they are the two that are dictating everything. Drake, I'm sure you've done shows in the past about all these reports about what the future of the college football playoff format looks like, where it's four teams from the SEC and the Big Ten, other conferences getting two, like it trickles down from there. Like those are the two powerhouses right now. Now, so often in the movies and TV shows, you see the two that like, oh, we're going to work together. In the end, someone ends up double crossing someone and trying to take all the power for themselves. So is that what Sankey, the SEC, could eventually try to do? I mean, potentially, I guess, but I don't see it. I think that we're still heading for two super conferences at some point. I don't want that to be the case. I really haven't loved conference realignment. I think it's been bad for the sport overall. You could argue, I think the expanded college football playoffs been good, but I think some of the realignment stuff has not been great. And I'm not saying that as in I don't enjoy being the Big 12, because I know that always gets spun. Utah's having fun in the Big 12. There's positive things there. We could say that for the third segment, but it would be fascinating, Drake, from a realignment perspective, if Nebraska went from Big 10 to SEC, because we have not seen that yet between the top two conferences.
I am certainly worried about the trajectory of college football because of the SEC. They worry me really. The Big Ten too, but the SEC more so. I think the SEC
Why?
more so. Because I believe that if given the Big Ten the opportunity to keep college football alive, they're stuck a little more than the SEC, because they still have the Illinois of the world. They still have the Marylands. They have enough like they roll about 6 deep. Past that, things start really getting thin when we talk about Rutgers and Purdue. In the SEC, they've got 2 or 3 that you would hold off the table if some wild big expansion thing happened. But by and large, they control all the cards. We talk like a top 40 teams in America. 15 of those are coming from a 16-team league that's the SEC. Maybe 12, 13, 14, somewhere in there, right? More than the Big Ten. That's why I think they hold the cards, and ultimately that is bad for college football. And if they decide, hey, let's press the red button one day, they're tough to turn down. If you are at the AD at Kansas and you get the SEC invite, it's hard to say no to that. And so I think that's where things get hairy. Where they get even worse, and where I also worry about the SEC, is people like Nick Sabin that have massive influence, ESPN that has massive influence, and now they want to ruin college football. Like publicly, they're telling us this on Locked On Big 12, Locked On Utes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's show is brought to you by Monarch Money. Monarch Money is huge. Look, I'm 24. I don't do the whole money thing. It's just, it confuses me. I look at my bank account and it's gone. With Monarch Money, they're your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. A complete financial command center, all in one place. Track your spending, investments, accounts. It's a one-stop shop to manage your money and start building wealth. When I started using Monarch, I realized how much I was spending on food delivery. Now I don't. I budget smart. Use my code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. Monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for half off your first year. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. JT, this was a crazy one. Nick Sabin doesn't like college football. The same guy who retired because things were getting so wild. This is from On 3, as Nick Sabin is to be named the co-chair of the Presidential Commission studying college sports. Then Sabin talks to Pat McAfee, saying, in essence, a quote here from Jack Trice Media, he's publicly said his ideal college football model would be an NFL-based structure, including the richest 40 teams and kicking everyone else to the curb. When someone of the influence of a Nick Saban in college football says, let's just go to the NFL model, let's just go to Georgia, Ohio State being in the same conference, a mega conference, we have that matchup every weekend. When a guy with that kind of voice says that, it is damning for this sport.
It absolutely is. I think it's interesting. There's been such a large push by fans, I think I'll say, and some media to make Nick Saban the commissioner of college football, because it's pretty clear he mainly has the SEC's best interest in heart and some of the Big Ten, but more so the top two than everyone else. And he doesn't care. He was one of the people, and yes, he has his obvious Bama affiliation, like campaigning for no SMU. Like, what is this team? In the McAfee interview, he mentions, like, if Ole Miss was in the Big 12, what would they have finished? I don't know, Nick. Maybe if they didn't lose to Kentucky, we wouldn't have even had to have that discussion. So once again, we do this in hypotheticals. Everyone told me Texas was going to steamroll over Arizona State. Arizona State should have won that game. And I'm talking about a 4th and 13, not even a missed penalty call. So I just think he's another example of a guy where his bias clearly shows. And I think he would not be a good commissioner, because he clearly is going to just try to do what's in the best interest of the top brands. Now, granted, maybe whoever is a commissioner would be, I don't like, why do we need to make it a smaller pool? Why do we need to cut everyone out? Is it just so the top teams can get even more money? They seem to be doing okay without it. I don't know, Drake. Like I said, man, I really hate it. I hate how we're just continuing to try to change the sport, and why college football is beautiful because it's its own thing. The NFL is great because it's its own thing. Like, why do we need to just copy what the NFL does? And then are we talking about, okay, so we do super conferences. So then is it like something like Iowa State is in the same, and who knows if they're even in the 40, right? But like Iowa State is close by other Midwest school like Wisconsin, something like that. So they're all in the same division, and that's how we kind of do it that way then. So I don't know. Once again, like Nick Saban even mentioning another hypothetical that tries to favor the SEC, it's just problematic. I do not like this situation. It is just another example of some of the top voices in college sports just trying to position the SEC and Big Ten for more power.
Yeah, and not only that, Nick Saban is employed currently by ESPN. His paychecks are signed by the 4 letters, and those 4 letters have been tasked with keeping the SEC alive. They've taken over CBS's role as the primary carrier. So ABC is going to get a major SEC game. Every afternoon, every morning, ESPN has that special lower third, special graphics just for the SEC, despite owning a large portion of the Big 12's media rights. That conference gets nothing special. The ACC gets nothing special. It's all about the S, the E, and the C. And Nick Saban, being a massive part of ESPN and a massive part of that conference's history, makes me turn my eyes to what ESPN is and what ESPN is doing to college football. It seems like their PR machine, as it continues to campaign for that conference, is actively campaigning for pretty much the death of everybody else.
It was pretty tough last year with some of the things that Kirk Herbstreit said. Some of those things are a great example of that. And ESPN, look, they have this massive deal with the SEC. It felt like game day every single week went to an SEC school. I think they went to Cal, and that was it for I don't know if for just ACC or Big 12. Maybe I'm forgetting one, I'm sure. And they'll start at Farmageddon this year, I think, right? Yeah. But even that's kind of the special game cheap, that was right? Far out. Yeah, it's not that big of a deal. So they've that's where it does get dangerous. I was very encouraged last year that the College Football Playoff Committee chose to do the right thing and put an SMU in, and then everyone wants to go, oh, well, SMU got steamrolled. Yeah, so did Tennessee. And Tennessee's game should have been the worst one of them all, if not for a miraculous end zone interception too. So once again, it drives me absolutely nuts that we continue to try to push this agenda. If they're so much better than everyone else, then why couldn't they steamroll in Arizona State? If Tennessee's so great, why didn't they compete more with an Ohio State too? So if with the same conclusion we always arrive at is the SEC is the best when the results tell us otherwise based on some of these other games. And if they are so great, why are you scared to go over into Big 12 teams' house, go over into some of these ACC teams' house, go into their house, beat the crap out of them. You tell me you're so much better than them all and you beat them in these hypotheticals, schedule them. Let's put your money where your mouth is. Let's actually go out and see and do it. But the truth is, then you do what Florida did, and then Florida wants to come out to Salt Lake City. And then what happens with Florida is Cam Rising didn't play. Shocker, I know. So then you have 2 backup quarterbacks that end up going out there for Utah, and they steamroll Florida, big bad SEC team. Oh, wow, what happened? Is Florida just a disaster, a mess? No, they weren't great that year, but the truth is it's really hard to win on the road in college football, and it's not just like SEC is the best at everything. So this is really disappointing that they continue to try and push this agenda, and in some ways it does concern me that ESPN does have the sole monopoly on the college football playoff. I credit the committee for doing the right thing last year, but we also heard about the SEC and Big Ten trying to pull the strings where they want to potentially use TV ratings. That's going to literally make me go bald, Drake. If we use TV ratings to get teams into the college football playoff just because we want them there, it's bad.
40 teams. If Nick Saban gets his way, if college football consolidates to that level, how many Big 12 teams are left off the table?
That's how many left off?
Yeah.
16-team league. I will easily say half. Agree or disagree with that?
I think at some level you have to agree. Half or close to it. 10 might make it in, and then 6 left away.
Like if Deion leaves Colorado, I don't think they're in right away. Like
no, not right away.
Get in.
For sure, because you're looking at a stacked. There are 20 brands that are just this automatic yes that you can't dance around, and that would be your Michigans, Ohio State, LSU, Alabama, Auburn, and then you get to that middle tier where you look at Wisconsin and you go, okay, Wisconsin versus Iowa State, they're going to nod to Wisconsin.
Probably.
Okay, well, Wisconsin versus Kansas State, they're going to nod Wisconsin. There are going to be a lot of those conversations in the room of, hey, what does our super conference look like? And I'm not sure if from a third party. I say third party, but really from the party controlled by the SEC and the Big Ten, that the Big 12 get a fair shake if we consolidated to 40.
I don't think they would at all. I mean, I'm trying to run through it in my head right now. Does BYU get in? They're an ascending power. Yes, I'm willing to say that as the Utah guy wearing a Utah hat. Do they get in? But they haven't done a ton in their past, but their future looks bright. So are they top 40? Because they haven't been lately, but they could be. What do you do with the Kansas State that's been there, but we don't know. Oklahoma State, they've had a good brand and everything. So who makes the cut? Who gets the decision? Do we do a soccer type relegation type thing? And that's something we talked about on the squad show last week. Probably not, because then one of the top brands sucks. They get relegated. And everyone's like, well, we don't like those teams don't want that. They just want to put themselves in the best position. They want to avoid the competition and instead just do everything they can to put themselves in the best spot by just beating their chest at how great they are. It goes back to the Ole Miss example I brought up. If Ole Miss was so great last year, then why are they losing to some of these bad teams? Beat the Florida team. Jackson Dart come through in that moment. Like Ole Miss as a whole. Lane Kiffin, you talk all the time on social media. Go out there and beat Kentucky. You were Kentucky's only P4 win. And once again, you all scream and tell me that they're just better. So yeah, this would really, like if they did a draft of this where Roger Goodell style, he's getting up on the stage, like it would suck to be a Big 12 fan because I don't know. I think you'd get 25 picks through maybe even to the 30s until you hear your first name. Now, granted, you could hear a couple in a row after that, but Drake, you already said there's that 20 that are a slam dunk. And even the ACC has more slam dunks to me right now than the Big 12 does, because those are the ones that are so actively and constantly being rumored to being drawn into another conference. So it's incredibly concerning. And I do think that if it was 40, honestly, right now, if the over under was at 5.5, I'd take the under for a Big 12 teams that get in this 40 league super conference, which I think is really unfortunate. And even, hey, in 3 minutes, I already went down on what my original one was, right? So that's just how scary and bleak a future would be if that's what they got to. Thankfully, I don't think they'll do that. But instead of a 40 team league, it just could be a type of super conference, and maybe that makes up 40. So that's scary.
Yeah, very. Coming up. What's not scary for Utah fans? Has BYU turned heel? Is Utah in the good graces of this league now? This is a Locked On Big 12, Locked On Utes crossover. JT, when I saw this tweet, I ran to you. Finally,
he did.
Has the day come for Utah fans where they get to be the good guys compared to BYU? This is from the Furlong podcast, tweeted out by Greg Welch. The quote is, there's a mature tone from Utah now. There's been an evolution in how the Big 12 fans view them. It's been funny with the tampering stuff that BYU's been linked to. There's a turning of the tide of fans toward Utah saying, we're sorry that we hated you so much. Now, if you listen to Locked On Big 12, Jake Hatch was on the show last week. If you listen to Locked On Big 12, we poke fun at Utah a ton. And BYU is, as you've mentioned before, a growing, budding brand in college football. They're breaking onto the scene, and NIL is a big part of that, the transfer portal. But how do you, for this Furlong podcast quote, is this real? Is Utah the good guy now? Is BYU turned heel?
Well, yeah, Josh Furlong's one of the top beat writers that covers the team, KSL.com. So absolutely a reputable source. And I'll say this, it's very interesting. Like when you talk about like, as some people like turning to Utah, it felt like a lot of Oklahoma State Twitter as of recently was siding with Utah with some of the tampering rumors and allegations, things surrounding a Justin Kirkland. I want to emphasize rumors more than anything because that's what that one was versus some of the other reporting based on some of them. I do think I think it's a mix, right? I think there are some fans, as this is social media, right? Like it's hard to set a social media, like just this is how it is on social media because there are so many differing opinions. I think there are some fans that look at it now, especially the Oklahoma State ones, as I mentioned, that are like, oh, look, we think BYU did this to us. So now we're on Utah's side and we're frustrated with BYU. But there are still people who bring up how last year Utah came into the conference and acted like they were better. Did some people do that? I guess. Sure. I felt like for the most part, though, it was just like, hey, on paper, we thought this team had the best roster and had the best chance to win the league at the time. And some people will still hold that against the Utah too, right? So I think it's a very mixed thing. And honestly, based on what I've seen, but it is very tough to tell just because it depends on what you see on social media, which is such a wide pool. I still feel like it's more negative towards Utah. Maybe that's how I'm treated on the squad show too. So maybe that's why I say that. But I don't know, Drake. I don't feel like it's something that's swung in positively in Utah's favor. But some of the rumors that have surrounded the way BYU has gone about building their roster, like just in general, like have not been good for the BYU brand. If you're talking about how certain rumors and what people think of them, it's not good when you have smoke surrounding these things. You can believe whatever reporting or think this about that, whatever. I'm just saying when those things are being leveled against you, that's not good. And that's why in some fan base's eyes, BYU has become the bad guy in a way.
Every conference needs a UT. Everybody, they need the one school, and Ohio State and Michigan both get to play this card a little bit, the one school that fan bases can rally around to dislike. Typically, the reason that school is disliked is because they are either good or they are cocky. And when they're good, they flaunt that. And when they're bad, they're still confident because that's what college football fans are supposed to do. To me, if this all flips and BYU becomes the bad guy of the Big 12, which I don't think we're trending completely in that direction right now. I think most of the tampering stuff blew over within a week. Utah has been in its first year, especially after the Mark Harlan quotes and the way the fans came in and the team not performing very well. Utah they've been the butt of a lot of jokes at this conference. And while that's got to suck for Utah fans, it's also great for building rivalries. It's great for building exposure. It's great for people being invested. Now, an Iowa State fan wants to beat Utah, which is in an insane sentence 5 years ago. But if that is the case today, it puts more butts in seats, more eyeballs on games. Is Utah filling a villain role? Should they? Because to me, if this all flips and Utah becomes the good guy after this tampering rumor deal, I don't know if that behooves the Big 12.
They were in the past. Maybe they still are. The Big 12 had a villain hole. The villain was Texas and Oklahoma. They left. So who's going to be cast as the villain? Last year, it was Utah because they came in with this expectation and getting a lot of media love. And there's always been that thing about, hey, what Pac-12 football is, in a lot of ways, I think a false narrative. But hey, Pac-12 football is this. They can't come play Big 12 football with us. You're saying this soft team from the Pac-12 is going to come into the Big 12 and run our conference? That's where right away Utah got off on a bad foot with a lot of those teams. So I do feel like this is an instance in a situation where if you made me say right now, like, who's the villain of the Big 12? Like, currently, while we sit here right here today, I would say it probably is Utah just because of how everything was received last year, too. But all it takes is Arizona State going back to back, something that is incredibly hard to do, and they could be the villain. You know who else is right up there probably for the villain of this conference? And when I say villain, I mean the most disliked. It's Colorado, because a lot of people don't like the way that Deion Sanders and the Buffs do certain things, too. So that's one right away that I look at, too. Mike Gundy is not always the most popular guy. So if Oklahoma State has a lot of success, I think right away they would be the villain. And you mentioned BYU. If BYU were to win it or go back to back or anything like that, they would absolutely become the villain of this conference, because anytime you are the most successful at something, there's what's that quote, where it's like they love to see a hero rise, but then they love to see him fall even more. We see that all the time where a lot of people will root for the ascension of a team. Patrick Mahomes wasn't always one of the most disliked players in the NFL, but all of a sudden he got really good. He was doing these passes and plays that we'd never seen. Then he gets oversaturated. You see him everywhere, and now everything's about it. Now Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce, it's all Chiefs, and no one really hated the Chiefs back when Alex Smith was the QB there, but now everyone hates them because they've won a bunch. So whoever wins the most of this conference year in and year out on a consistent basis, which the Big 12 has not really been consistent, it's unpredictable. That's what we love about it. But whoever becomes the most consistent team in this conference year over year, as long as hopefully the conference stays together, they will become the villain.
It still feels like many BYU fans are throwing Utah under the bus, as they should. I'm not
it's rivalry. I have no issue with it.
Utah fans should do the exact same. But fans of every Big 12 school seemed to unite a few months ago around BYU. And maybe, according to this podcaster or beat reporter, that is changing. I don't know. I don't have a read on it. I'm only on Twitter so much. But the question I would ask then, why do you think so many Big 12 fans fell in love with BYU?
so many Big 12 fans fell in love with BYU. I think it was a cool, well, number one, I'm just going to say this right away, Drake. I think most of the people that I think it is BYU fans. Like, I do think that is the number one thing over everything. Sure, maybe did they root for BYU a little bit because Utah was big bad Utah in terms of just the team that came in with all these expectations saying they were going to run the conference. That's part of it too. For BYU, though, their story, I think from a PR standpoint, I think Kalani Sitake is incredibly likable. I think the Jake Retzlaff story was a fantastic one, too, and really cool. You're talking about a team that did, what else did they have? Underdog narrative. Didn't win a lot of games. We were projected at 4.5 wins. Skyrocket past that. Playing a bunch of fun, exciting, and close games, too. I don't really know who on BYU you can look at and be like, oh, I hate them. I can't stand them. Versus, I don't really think Utah had anyone, but just because of those expectations that were kind of there, and they had one in the past, I think there were a lot of people that disliked that about Utah. So I look at it for that standpoint, but I do feel like that will turn very quickly. Once again, if BYU wins a lot, I mean, Drake, do you view, you were asking me who I view as the villain. Do you view Utah as the villain of this conference right now?
I hope so. Again, it goes back to that first statement. We need it. We need someone to be there. We do, objectively. So playing into that only helps the conference as a whole. If Utah wins the Big 12 championship next season, that's the best possible scenario, quite possibly for the Big 12 conference. Why?
So?
Because you said it. The more you win, the more people hate you. So
is it BYU? If that happens with BYU, do you think, like, if BYU went back to back, do you disagree with me that I feel like they become the villain of the conference?
Yeah, at some point, if BYU goes back to back, there are Big 12 fans and this is the same for Alabama. People hated Alabama because they kept winning. I mean, if you keep winning, that people hate Clemson in the ACC because they keep winning. That's what's going to happen for BYU, for Kansas State, for an Oklahoma State, for an Arizona State, as you mentioned beforehand. But having a built-in heel, a school to hate whether they're good or bad, a la Texas, is great for this league. If Utah's going to fill that role, it's only going to help the Big 12 conference. And if they do win next season, the same way when Texas won the Big 12 title, everyone was furious. You had to watch because you hate watch. You're rooting for anyone who's playing Texas. If Utah can be that, it only means more exposure, more PR. And that's a good thing. JT Westersill, where can folks find more of your work?
Well, speaking of exposure and PR, my friend, you can find me at Locked On Utes on X as well as on YouTube there too. And at JT Westersill on X too. Drake, am I just really pale or are you tan? I can't decide.
I've been sitting at the beach a little bit, that's where I live. So
I think I need to light it better. That's probably part of it too. I feel like I'm very, very pale. I'm almost looking as blue as like BYU as I was talking about so much.
This has been and always will be. Thanks for making it your first listen every single day. Locked On. Thanks for making it your first listen every single day. A crossover with Utes and Dose Grande.